Thank you, Ajay. In the next 20 minutes, there is a whole host of changes that have been brought about in the indirect tax involving service tax, excise, and customs. But I would only like to stress on a few key changes which I feel are important for this audience. And before I start, I want to give a perspective in terms of what this whole indirect tax gathering mechanism means. If you look at the gross tax revenue, it was 12 lakh crores, 12.4 lakh crores. Actuals, all taxes put together, 2014-15. In 2016-17, we are anticipating 16.3 lakh crores. And if you look at the increase from 2015-16 revised estimates to 2016-17, the increase is 11.7%, as against the previous increase between 2014-15 and 15-16 of 17.2%. Government believes that it is going to get less revenue between 15-16 and 16-17, 11.7% increase, as against 17.2% increase which was there in the previous 2014-15 compared to 2015-16. As to what this points out in terms of economy, we need to figure out. But this is the estimate of tax revenues, which is the real fountain from which all of us are going to get paid, or ability to borrow or hold on to our ratings. Out of this total increase of 1.7 lakh crores in tax revenue between previous year and estimated for 16-17, 20,000 crores comes from additional taxation, and 1.51 lakh crores comes from buoyancy, as has been estimated. This is one piece of statistics which I would like you to bear in mind. The second one is the tax GDP ratio. This was 10.75%, a ratio of total taxes to the total GDP. In 2015-16, it is 10.8% in 16-17. The third statistic, which is very revealing between what happened in 2015-16 and going to happen in 16-17, the revised estimates for 2015-16 compared to the budget estimates, you will find that between the budget estimates of 2015-16 and the revised estimates, there was only a 10,000 crore increase. But as Mr. Parthasarathi showed, there was a deep dip in the direct tax collections, both in the form of income tax as well as corporate tax, to the order of nearly 45,000 crores, made up by central excise of 54,000 crores. And you must have repeatedly seen the increases in petrol duties after duties immediately before the budget to make up for the sort of increase. Mr. Vikram asked the question, where is it a lie or is it a truth? The truth is that the indirect tax collections in this form went to make up the fall in the direct tax collections of nearly 45,000 crores, both on account of income tax as well as on account of corporate tax. And lastly, the direct-indirect tax ratio, which is another methodology to see where we progress in terms of the multi-spectrum antibiotics that we use, because indirect tax is multi-spectrum, it hurts everybody. You will find that the indirect taxes were 43.8% in 2014-15, went up to 48.2% in 15-16, and still around 47.8%. Gone are the days where we had 57% of direct tax and 43% of indirect tax. I want you to keep these 3 or 4 parameters in mind, because this will tell us as to what is the real confidence in terms of these numbers and the growth that we have projected. And if we are to make up in the form of those excise duty changes, including in this budget, you will see aviation for turbine fuel being increased, again to enrich the coffers of the central government. 2 other observations before I go on to the formal presentation. One is, we were expecting a lot about GST. It is buried completely in the maze of annexures after annexures to the budget speech for the first time I have seen. But one very interesting feature about these annexures, which Mr. Parsati also spoke about, is that these annexures have clearly allowed us to concentrate, because all the effective rates are mentioned there itself. You don't have to go and search in notification after notification whether there is an increase, at least on the customs, excise and service tax side. It is all available there. And our only worry was that he should have added something about GST, particularly on 2 aspects of GST, where there is a crying need. One is to popularize what GST is. And if you go to the rural sectors, you will find there is abysmal ignorance and therefore opposition to this GST, which can add, according to several pundits, 1 to 2% of GDP. The second one is in terms of IT familiarization, which could have also been initiated in this budget. At least when you talked so much about various things, you can also say that we are handling the IT aspects in terms of popularization. And the third one, most important, is the integration of the collectors. You are going to talk of both the central excise officer as well as the VAT officer of the state sitting together to assess on the same value. And there is no attempt at all, at least not that I have seen, to integrate these people, because they have to do the assessments, and this is a human issue. And unless you address this issue, you can announce it on paper, but it will work differently on the field. So therefore, there was a big disappointment, according to me, at least on the soft issues and the hard issues concerning GST, which could have been initiated even without a formal legislation. Having said that, let us look at the, there is this Krishi Kalyan cess, an across the board Senvata bill. So the speech says in clause 152, but nowhere in the rules as yet, because this is going to happen only on 1/6/2016. There are 4 important dates that you must keep in mind from the service tax perspective, wherever you are dealing with service tax, because there are certain immediate changes which have taken place on the 1st of March, which will take place. Some from 1st of April, some from the date when Pranab Mukherjee puts his seal to the Finance Act, and then to become an act, and then some from 1st of June. Next. There are 3 important changes which I feel are to be touched upon. One is the changes in the education sector. This has been removed from the negative list. Health and education worldwide, even under the GST regime, have some protection. But here we are removing this from the negative list and putting the whole thing in the exemption notification. Exemption is a matter of grace, not a matter of right. And if you don't believe that education is something which is required as a matter of right, and that is why in 2012, 1/7/2012, when we went on to the new system, we said we want to put in the negative list those items which will not be frequently changed. And we have consigned the whole education sector, the exemptions for the education sector, into the exemption notification, which means it can be changed by a fiat of the executive at any point of time. Fortunately, if you see the premier institutions like IIM, which were bogged down with litigation on service tax for last several years, have been completely now given an amnesty virtually by saying all their past dues will be forgotten, because they were already qualified to give degrees And now we recognize those degrees as the Ministry of HRD, and therefore their part dues will be forgotten, virtually forgotten. The second one is this controversy between stage carriage and contract carriage, which has been riddled with n number of problems. And now transport of passengers by stage carriage, which was part in the negative list, has again been removed, and it will be again subjected to tax. The third one is the transport of goods by vessel, which will again be brought to tax shipping companies. Only thing is they will zero rate it. That means they can take credit, as in the case of the Krishi Kalyan cess. Similarly, here also you will be entitled to take credit, but vessels coming up to the station, custom station, will be now subject to service tax. Lottery distribution has been under great stress right from the beginning, and now again it will be subject to service tax. Radio frequency spectrums. Here we are going to have an interesting battle between the VAT authorities and the service tax authorities, because from 1st of April this will be treated as not intangible goods but as service, and therefore subject to service tax. But should that bind the state governments, as it happens in software, as it happens hire of buses, as it happens in machinery? Why should they accept? They can say that it is still intangible goods, and therefore you will have the double taxation, which can again be resolved only by some mechanism. And this is what we were expecting, some mechanism to at least bring about some congruence between the taxing powers of the state and the center by mediation process. Limitation from 18 months has been extended to 30 months. Even under normal circumstances, they can open your service tax assessments for 30 months. There was a high rate of income service tax for delay in payment, up to 30%. Now that has been brought down to 24%, only in those cases where you have collected the tax and not paid the tax. And being an indirect tax, how do you prove that you have not collected the tax? If you have collected consideration and it is deemed that consideration includes tax, then you have collected the tax. Therefore, in effect, you will pay 24%. There are some changes because service tax, one of those changes made last couple of years back was to arrest. And the limits now have been increased to 2 crores. Next. As I said, some beneficial changes on exports, because there was a question about sales commission, whether it was entitled for. There were some judgments, court judgments, which said that sales commission is not entitled for a refund, and those are now being corrected in the form of beneficial retrospective amendments, as in the case of the IAMs that I pointed out. Construction sector also, particularly in the context of canals, in the context of roads, bridges, past litigation up to 1st of March, all those cases, including where you build a school building, those cases which have been bogged down with litigation, those will now be cleared. At least some attempt to see that past cases are resolved to the extent possible. Software, IT software, we are gone back to a situation where that if you have IT companies having MRP on their software, which are also in a materialized condition, in a media form, they have said that you need to pay either excise duty or service tax, and not both. Senior advocates will now be subject to service tax on what they call the forward scheme, not the reverse scheme, but the forward scheme. So they will have, they are the first entrant into the service tax now in this fashion. Next. Monorail, metro rail from 1st of March will be liable to tax. Services. So there are certain new exemptions, but most of these exemptions, starting from Deen Dayal, vocational center are all services rendered by one sector of the government to another sector of the government. Similarly, abatements And all these constitute for your 20,000 crore additional collections which are going to come. Mutual fund agents, I think this has been, Vasati would vouchsafe, it has been most changed process time and again and again. Now we have gone back to a situation where they will be forward charged and not back charged. In other words, I think this was a welcome relief for the mutual fund companies which were having a double whammy on this count. Maybe there will be some stock market reaction to this as well. Next. A mention was made about ready-made garments when Mr. Parsati dealt with textiles, when he mentioned about Madura coats and so on. We have now come back to again taxing ready-made garments. One of the very complex situations which we went through only a couple of years back, we gave up, again we have come back. Similarly with jewelry, at some time they said that jewelers would not pay, so we reversed. Again we have come back with some limits saying that in excess of 6 crores, jewelers would be responsible. There are incentivizations of domestic value addition made in India, and that is why you would find that there is a combination of both excise and customs, which you will read in the budget speech itself as annexure. Wherever government feels, including defense, about which it was mentioned, we want to promote local manufacture of defense. And therefore, to that extent, you will find that there are some prohibitive duties in the form of customs being imposed. So it has been specifically provided for renewable energy, capital goods, mineral oils, chemical and petrochemical, paper boards, electronics, hardware and software, automobiles, defense production, MRO of aircraft, which was where we were spending a lot of foreign exchange. Even to send an engine from here, we had to go to Singapore. But now we could open those, and renewable energies. Next. Water, including mineral waters, will again be subject to further duties. Aviation turbine fuel, which may not come to the consumer, but will between the oil companies and the government. And infra cess on motor vehicles. One thing which you need to keep in mind is whenever a cess is levied, of course he has rationalized 13 cesses at 50 crores, 650 crores. But there are other cesses which are levied, and all these cesses are retained by the central government only. They are not shared with anybody. And that is why you have the Swachh Bharat cess, which is not creditable, and now you will have the Krishi cess, which is creditable. But at the same time, the infra cess, we don't know whether it will be creditable. But if it is not creditable, again, it will be one of those cesses which will be totally a cost to these companies. Next. Tobacco and tobacco products, much less than the 100% increase, 10 to 15% only in this budget. There are changes in customs and baggage declaration. If you go abroad, you can bring more now without having to pay duty, and some relaxation on the reduced obligation also. There is a scheme by which you can go and withdraw your appeals by a declaration before the commissioner appeal, by paying the tax, duty, by paying interest and paying 25% penalty. Then you can withdraw your appeal with a declaration. Next. I have talked about cesses to be rationalized. Interest rates, they are being brought down to 15% from the previous 18%. A very important change on Senvat credit rules. I think this was a much needed change. It was very complex. Even the Supreme Court said it was complex. So therefore, there are on the apportionment, particularly when you use credit for both exempted and dutiable goods or exempted and taxable services, these rules have made a lot of sense now, but we will have to go into the detail to see. But broadly, these rules are an important forward movement, I would say, than what we had in the past. Similarly, from as many as 27 returns in the case of a large taxpayer the number of returns have been brought down very substantially. And certain deferral payments on account of customs, particularly in the context of exports, have also been brought in. On the whole, I would say that this is one budget where you don't have to refer to 100 notifications in order to find out where you are. All said and done, the annexures do make some sense in terms of at least a ready reckoner with you, only seeing the budget as to whether it has increased or not increased. And I think that is, at least on the customs excise and service tax side, a facilitation process. Thank you very much.